You're all very welcome. My name's Ronan. I'm the head of fundraising and communications. My role today is really just to help the flow of things. You can see our head of programs there, Matt Banks, and our chief executive and founder, Richard Moore. And I'm going to hand over to Richard now just to kick things off and give a quick introduction.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for giving up your Friday lunchtime to come and join us. You are very welcome. And this is probably the first time we've tried something like this or done this in this way. So, but we see it as a great opportunity for us to update you, our supporters, and people interested in the work we do. It's a great way for us to update you and where things are at. Hopefully, at the end of the session today, you feel a bit better informed and a bit more connected to the children in Crossfire. You'll be delighted to hear that you don't have to listen to me an awful lot today. So that's a good thing. And I'm going to introduce Matthew now. Matt has been working with the organisation 15 years. When he joined us, he was country director in Tanzania. So he went to Tanzania initially and basically developed our Tanzania program there from virtually its infancy. And the program that we have out there now, he was very much instrumental in the building of that. And obviously the team out there now taking it to the other heights, which Matt will talk you through. So I'm going to pass you over to Matt. He's now head of programs with Children in Crossfire since he's moved on from being country director in Tanzania, which means he's responsible or has oversight of Tanzania and Ethiopia, as well as our global citizenship education program in Ireland as well. So I'll be talking to you towards the end when Matt's finished, but for now, I'll pass you over to Matt.
Thank you, Richard. Thanks for that. As my kids say, I'm your head of the world, Daddy. So not quite, but getting there. Just a couple of housekeeping points. As you know, it's being recorded. I hope that's okay with everybody. We can't see you. There is a Q&A icon down on the bottom towards the left-hand side. If you've got any questions, just write them in there and we'll come to them at the end. I'm going to talk for about 15 minutes or so about the work, and then we can address any questions after that. So without further ado, here's where we test the technology. And in theory, you are seeing a nice slide there now. So there is so much to talk about in our work. And I guess the idea of this presentation is to pick out some of the general themes and some of the highlights that bring a bit of tangibility to those big themes of the things that we're working on. There we go. So starting at the highest level, I suppose, our vision and mission. As an organization, the word compassion is very important to us, partly through the history of the organization, through Richard's story, and through our connections with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So we want to create a compassionate world where all children reach their potential through education. And that theme of education I'll come to in a minute, but we believe that's like the tip of the spear of our work, and then the other aspects that support that. Our mission is we can't do this alone, so we work with others to tackle the injustices of poverty affecting children, and especially children. So from that high level, we work, as Richard mentioned, we work in Ireland and Northern Ireland, and we work in Tanzania and Ethiopia. And there's a complementarity, if that's a word, to those programs. In Ireland and Northern Ireland, we have a global citizenship education program. And this is aiming to connect. We work through teachers and youth and community groups. We do broader kind of public engagement work. And really here, we're trying to connect people to themselves and to the world around them, around their role and their connection to people who are at the suffering end of global injustices. So we try to take schools through a journey to become more globally aware of who they are in the world, and to connect them to people who are living more challenging lives, maybe. So that work in Ireland and Northern Ireland sets the foundations of understanding. And then there's our work in Tanzania and Ethiopia. which is, what are we doing about it? We can't do everything. So for us in Children in Crossfire, and it's connected a bit when we first started working in Tanzania, so many young children, not in a 40-50% of young children undernourished, 70-80% of children not accessing any kind of education before they go into formal education at 6 or 7 years old. So many barriers that these children face in getting to the schools. So our program was really looking at how can we really have a big impact on young children, and why work with the youngest children. So just a couple of slides, a couple of diagrams here that just bring attention to that. This diagram on the left here shows the brain connections that are made in the first year of life, and then up to the 6 or 7 years old. The brain is never as active again in the human life as it is at this stage. So if we can give children good education, good nutrition, good parenting in that age, there's a lot of evidence, a lot of research that says those people go on to do better at school, better in life, and are more productive to the societies that they grow up in. And for countries that we're working in that are facing the challenges of climate change, we need these young children to be growing up to be resilient, educated adults. There's an economic argument. This graph here shows the return on investments in programs supporting young children versus older people at the end, job training type programs. So the more we invest in young children, the more of a return we get. And this final diagram really shows it's called the Nurturing Care Framework. And it's a global initiative that all the governments in the world, including the Irish, the Northern Irish government, governments in Tanzania and Ethiopia, they align to this global framework for young children. And there's aspects there of early learning, good health, good nutrition, responsible parenting, and protection, safety and security for children. So our focus point is the red one there, early learning. But we realize, as you can see in that diagram, that does not exist on its own. We also need good health and nutrition and good support around children. So that's what our programming is trying to do. Early childhood education, like I said, is a focus of our work. It's the tip of the spear. And I guess when we started to work there, what we've seen in Tanzania and Ethiopia is very poor provision for those 3 to 5, 6-year-old children. This is the stage of life where children are learning social emotional skills. They're learning to hold a pen, to draw lines, to negotiate with each other. So what we're trying to do in early childhood education in Tanzania and Ethiopia is bring what we would call play-based learning into those environments. Too often we walked into classrooms and we see children sitting in overcrowded classrooms in rows of desks, copying what the teacher says at the front. And there's a lot of research that shows that is not how children at that age learn. They learn by doing, they learn by playing, and we've been able to transform education in the areas that we work to show a play-based approach to learning. And this is training the teachers. You can see nearly 800 teachers trained just last year alone. 70,000 children in Tanzania and Ethiopia in the schools where we're working have benefited from a better quality of early learning. So we take the chairs and the tables out of the room. We put learning corners. We put mats on the floor. We have games. You've seen in the photographs on that previous slide, building things. And alongside this, we've been building evidence and research. And we've been tracking these children as they go into formal education, into standard 2, standard 3. And our research and our evidence is showing us very clearly that there is a significant improvement in the learning outcomes of children 2 years after they're in formal education. They are, I think it's 20 points better than children who have not had experienced quality early learning. So what we're really starting to demonstrate here is that play-based learning puts a better kind of quality of child into formal education, and then they do better when they're there. We're already scaling our programs at the regional level in Tanzania. We're a little bit younger as an organization in Ethiopia, but we're following that model, taking that learning into the Ethiopian context, and really delivering improvements in education. Over the next 5 years, we will reach, and we aim to reach, hundreds of thousands more children as these programs expand and get taken on by government as well. What I've talked about there is the work we do in specific target regions of the countries where we work to demonstrate what good quality early learning looks like. But we can't do it everywhere, and nor should we. That is the job of governments. So from the very beginning, we work very much alongside and with the local government, the regional governments, and the national governments. And in fact, in Tanzania, over the last 7 or 8 years, we have been the driving voice, the leading voice in the development of a national early childhood development policy. And that policy is now being rolled out across all 26 regions in Tanzania. There's 9 million children that are being impacted by this policy. And we are working with local civil society organizations in each of those regions to hold the government accountable for the commitments they've made and to support the government to learn and take experience from our work into their rolling out. So this is a really major impact. And this is how a small charity like Children in Crossfire can work in specific regions, specific areas to directly impact the lives of hundreds of thousands of children and do that in partnership with government at a more national level to potentially impact millions of children. And we're really passionate about that. And that's been a really strong part of our program in Tanzania and starting to look at that now in Ethiopia as well. Like I said at the beginning, early learning does not exist in isolation. And we could create the best schools and the best classrooms, and there would still be children sitting at home, not able to access that education. And those children sitting at home, almost without exception, are the poorest and the most vulnerable communities and families. The poorest, for sure. So we have some programs, especially in Ethiopia, where we are working with the local authorities to identify the most vulnerable families and understand how we can lift them up a little bit. And the most basic thing is supporting income generation. With a bit of income generation, especially with the women's groups, women, when they get a bit more income, they tend to use it to support their children and to give their children opportunities. So we've currently got 150 women they're called village savings and loans schemes in Ethiopia. We also have community awareness groups. We call them, we use the traditional coffee ceremonies to bring women together and teach them about nutrition and health. So this is one way, income generation, supporting women especially to then support their children. We also look at health and nutrition. A sick child who is undernourished is not going to school. So how can we look at identifying those children in the areas where we work and support them to be well enough to go to school? In Ethiopia, and with a very long-term partnership there we have with a program in Waliso, which is about 200 kilometers west of Addis Ababa, we support a therapeutic feeding unit for the most severely malnourished children. They are very close to dying, and it's an amazing part of my job, and the work of our organization to go and visit this place where those children are almost at the last chance salon, and they are able to access highly professional treatment to gradually build their nutrition and their resistance and get them back into school. We do a lot of work with healthcare workers to educate them and to help prevent malnutrition as well. Another barrier to accessing good education is people are sick from drinking bad water. It's very simple. We take water so much for granted. What we found in Ethiopia especially was people just were drinking river water and getting sick and not going to school. We spoke to schools, we speak to communities, we speak to families. This was the thing. So we've now built about 15 wells in the last 10 years in the most vulnerable communities, the hardest to reach places, and as well as improving school attendance, we've actually transformed those communities. The whole community is well. The well becomes like a social aspect of the village, bringing people together. So we really, when we can get the funding for that, it's about £10,000 to build a well in a village. And whenever we're able to do that, we look to do that. Another barrier and another big tangible part of our work is there's not enough classrooms. You can see there, overcrowding is a huge problem with 200 or 300 children per class. In Tanzania, that is commonplace. 200 or 300 children in a classroom. At that point, you're not doing learning, you're doing babysitting, and it's not really conducive to learning at all. So we've had a program to build 100 schools over the current 5 years, and we're over halfway already in building that. When we build a classroom, not only does it ease the capacity in the school, it motivates children to attend. We do split systems, we do shift systems to reduce the size of those learning groups. And again, bringing attention to early learning and the importance of early learning, it encourages people to go and it makes it important within the school. So that's really a big part of what we've done as well to support the schools. Thought we'd just bring attention to a couple of, a case study in particular, and Ethiopia. I'm sure you've heard in the news in recent times that Ethiopia has had a lot of challenges as a country. And more recently, the war in the Tigray region in the north led to some horrific humanitarian situations. Again, the poorest and the most vulnerable fleeing their homes with nothing but the shirt on their back. This little girl here, who we'll call Nasua, had basically witnessed the conflict coming to her home, coming to her village. Her mother had died, and her father put her on a bus and wrote a phone number on her hand and said, take my daughter to Addis and phone this number. Her auntie is there. She'll look after her. And it was a 2 or 3 day bus journey from the conflict region down to Addis Ababa. The bus driver phoned the auntie who came to collect her. And she ended up in one of the schools that we're working at in Addis Ababa. And in fact, what we found was a lot of the classes in the schools we were working in suddenly had a big influx of children, a lot of whom were living on the street at night and then coming to school in the daytime. And this is a case, Nasua's case was one of over 40 children and families who were brought to our attention, who had been displaced by the war. Just really touching. I could just seeing her face there, and having met her in person and visited that school, to work for an organization that is able to get to those kinds of children and those kinds of people is a real inspiration for me. And I work here, and hopefully to our supporters as well, that we're really able to reach some of those. Being a smaller organization, we can bring attention to the individuals that really need our support. So that's Nasua's story a little bit. And then finally, more recently, we've started working in Dar es Salaam, in the high density urban settings. We might call these slum areas. I mean, there's barely a tree to be seen. It's corrugated roofs and alleyways as far as the eye can see. And within these densely populated areas are daycare centers for children 3 to 5 years old. And they're not safe. They're not regulated. They're not registered. And yet children are being sent there every day. So we've really identified that need in recent times and looked to initiate a program in Dar es Salaam. And we're looking in these first 3 years to work through about 70 of these daycare centers that'll benefit about 5,500 children. Now, not only does this provide better quality early learning for these children in a very challenging context, but it also gives their mothers the safety that their child is somewhere safe, and then they can go and earn money themselves for the day. So it's empowering women and mothers to get out and work, and it's providing good quality education for children. And we've really learnt about what it's like to live in these areas. 60 to 90 pence a day people are living on. I mean, it's just incredible to think about that for a minute. So there's much more I could tell. There's so many amazing stories of our work and challenges that we face. But just as an overview for now, that's me done. I'm going to hand back to Ronan now to see to take it forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt. That's a brilliant overview, and I think we were all touched by the Nasua story. It was her mum, all her siblings, and her grandparents were all killed, and I think that was a really powerful example of the impact that Children Crossfire makes. Before I open it up to questions from the wider audience, there's one component part of our work that you didn't touch on there, because we thought it would be quite powerful coming from Richard. That's essentially the Addis Hiwot community's story, a long-term relationship between Children of Crossfire and those people. And Richard, if you don't mind now, just taking a few minutes to tell people that story and how it has ended up, I think that'll be really appreciated.
All right, thanks, Ronan, and thanks very much, Matt. The Hiwot project, we also referred it here as a graveyard project. And the reason why Ronan has asked me to share this with you is because it sort of gives an example of how ultimately we stay with a program, and you know it has a good result at the end, but everything takes time. And in 2008, I went out to Ethiopia for the first time, and no, it wasn't my first time in Ethiopia, but I think it was out once before that. But I went out to Ethiopia in 2008, and the people that met me there took me to a graveyard. And the reason why they took me to a graveyard is because there was 260 people living and sleeping on top of graves, and they wee makeshift houses made out of bits of bamboo, bits of wood, bits of plastic. You know, they just built these small makeshift houses from that, and the people just lived and slept on top of the graves. There was no toilets, no running water. They were in very poor condition, the people themselves, and lack of food and malnutrition. At least 50% of them were children, and they all lived, or those children begged on the streets during the day and were involved in other activities as well, you know, that they helped earn money to feed themselves and feed their families. So the health situation was very poor, and you know, their living conditions was just dire. The day that I arrived, there was a torrential. It was a rainy season, and there was torrential rainstorms, and all 260 people were sitting out on the ground in the graveyard and on the mud, because they'd heard this person was arriving that might be able to help. And the spokesperson at that time stood up. He was the chairman of the group, let's say, and he said, "Look, if somebody doesn't do something soon, then we're all going to die." And to be honest, when you were there that day, it was very believable, and it's very stark and shocking to hear that anyway. So when you're in that situation, you can't really promise anything other than you will do your best to get their story out there and try to help as much as you can. So initially, we were, thanks to the support and the funds that we receive here and the donations we receive, we were able to allocate funds to, first of all, provide food, to provide better cooking utensils, to provide better sort of warmer blankets and stuff like that. And we also engaged a medical person to go into the graveyard as needed to deal with any medical needs. And eventually we engaged a teacher, and they set up a classroom underneath a tree, and the children there began to attend school. After, I think, about 2 years, we raised enough money, which is around €300,000, and we bought 60 small condos. So it's like a small apartment block, let's say. And each family were given a room which was their home. And then what they did, they hung curtains up in the middle of the room so that they could separate it out into a living room, bedroom, and kitchen area. And that in 2010, all 60 families, 260 people were moved into those condos. And when I went back out in 2011, it was amazing. There was also a school beside the condos, so all the children started to go to school as well. So when I went out in 2011, it was a completely different story. The children were in school uniform, they were dancing and singing when we arrived, and the families were living in warm, dry accommodation where they had electricity, they had toilets, and they were still under the feeding program that we had initiated. But as you know, moving people in the condos doesn't mean they're all of a sudden rich or everything's sorted out. They had to be, we had to look at income generating programs where we could train the families up on being able to earn money for themselves. So to cut a long story short, I went back out there last year. It was the year before last year. And I went to the Addis Hewitt project, and they were all there, all the families out, and they were very welcoming, and they had a coffee ceremony and all for us when we arrived. And the same chairperson stood up and made a speech. And he said two things that I took away that day. One was that we no longer need the support of children in Crossfire. The families were now self-sufficient. At least 16 of the children from 2008 were now in third level education, and they were able to fend for themselves. The second thing he said is, we have defeated poverty. And to me, that's what Children in Crossfire is about. That's what our work's about, that we stay with the community to help as much as possible, help them navigate themselves out of poverty. So I'll stop there and pass it back to you, Roland.
Thank you very much, Richard. It really is one of the most stories in the whole storybook of Children in Crossfire, the Addis Hewitt project. I'm keeping an eye on time. We don't want to keep anybody for too long. But Matt, I just wanted to open it up now. If anybody who's not asked a question yet wants to ask a question, just do so in the Q&A and I'll see it. And Matt, the first thing that's coming through relates to our work with the Tanzanian government and just a bit more information on how that came about and how it works.
I suppose we look at building relationships with governments from the beginning. Was no point in doing what we're doing if it can't be sustained by the government and the local systems and structures around us. So even when we're working at a community level, we're doing it with local government people with us. So our approach has been, let's work on the ground level in alignment with government systems and structures and policies, and let's show them what can be done if their policies were invested in and were delivered. And we generate evidence from that. And then we try to take that up the chain into the national level. Now, there are, in Tanzania and Ethiopia, there are structures and working groups and forums where civil society organizations can bring evidence of their work to governments. And I guess what we did in Tanzania over a period of time was we delivered on the ground. We proved that what we were doing was working. And we used that to bring government officials into that. Come and see our schools, come and meet the teachers, come and talk to the local government people who are delivering this program with us. And that got their attention. And then we were also presenting at those higher levels, let's call it the macroeconomic arguments. You've got a very high population of young children. You need to give them the best start in life if you're going to produce a middle-income economy 20 years from now. And that coming from people like us and our partners and from the wider world, the scientific community, etc., I think started to get the attention of the government. With our funding, we were then able to initiate meetings and dialogues and working groups. Early childhood development exists across multiple ministries: health, education, social welfare. You've got finance ministries. And we had to kind of work around all of these ministries to bring people together around the idea that investing in their young children should be a national priority. And as always with these things, you find your champions, you find the people who get inspired by what you're doing. And over a period, it started when I was still there in 2014 when I left. And it was in 2021 where the president launched the National Multi-Sectoral Early Childhood Policy. So that's 7 or 8 years there of advocacy and engagement, and working through them with the government systems. So it's very much a partnership, a balance between holding them to account and supporting them to deliver.
That's brilliant, Matt.
Yeah.
Thank you. And actually, the next question follows on directly from that in a way, at a totally different level. You mentioned when you were talking there about local partners, and this question relates to why do we work with local partners, basically?
Yeah, I mean, local partners, they know the communities. It's their country, it's their region, it's their village, it's their district. They've often been working there for many years. And I think what an organization like Children in Crossfire can bring is we can bring access to funding from international organizations. We can bring technical expertise, program expertise. But what we can't bring is local knowledge. We don't know the people. We're not from there. Different customs and different program activities work very differently in Tanzania to in Ethiopia. So we look to identify partners that are working in that space in the areas that we're targeting. And we can build their capacity, support them with program management, with finance systems, with strengthening their governance systems, and supporting them to engage in the communities that they already know. So that's we bring value to them, but they bring value to us in a way that's something we just can't bring. So they're really crucial to the work we do on the ground in Tanzania and Ethiopia.
Brilliant, Matt. The next question from a familiar name, Bernie Ryan. Hello, Bernie. Years back, there was a campaign to change government policy so that orphans were not made homeless after parents passed away. Bernie's wondering, did that become policy?
In Tanzania? Was that specific to Tanzania or as a general? I mean, there's certainly, I think the idea of orphanages for orphaned children is gone for the most part. They still exist, but I mean, a government's policy in Tanzania would be to support children in their communities with extended families, or with foster families. They have a program of what's called a most vulnerable orphaned and vulnerable children, OVCs, and governments now have I think it's certainly in Tanzania and Ethiopia, fairly well-established social protection measures in place for those children to support them into school, support them with families. Of course, you know, the challenges of growing up as a child without parents is globally a challenge. I mean, they don't really have the mental health and well-being structures in place in those countries at this point, but they're certainly not putting them into orphanages so much anymore, if at all.
And actually, coincidentally, leading on from Matt, your slide on inner city Dar es Salaam, you showed the image of the wee boy baking or preparing flatbread with his mum. One of the other stories that we have heard back very recently relates to a young child who is an orphan and has HIV as well. And he lives with, we have clarified, it's his wider family network is so important, and he lives with, it's actually his great uncle, but it's his granda, essentially, is who he's living with. And you know, the granda has said in our engagement with him about the importance of the daycare centres for that wee lad, and that he's determined to keep getting that wee lad into school. He's 73 himself, and I'm sure he just wants to get that kid all the support he can while he's still around. So a very relevant question, Bernie. Thanks.
Yeah.
I wanted to just bring things towards a conclusion now. I suppose with the question, in Ethiopia and in Tanzania, Matt, you've covered where we've come from over a long period of time. Where would you like to see from now?
You broke up a bit there. 5 years from now.
Five years from now, yeah.
I mean, the programs are at different levels of maturity. In Tanzania, we are already operating at a national level, at a regional level. We're scaling our program at the moment to 800 schools across a whole region, and we want to take that model across other regions. So in Tanzania, I think it's about sustaining what we're doing, making sure that what we do works through government systems and can be sustained by the government. So you might say our approach is we build models of good practice, we pilot this good, we show what can be done, and then we strengthen the system to deliver that at scale. And that's where we're at in Tanzania right now. We're very highly respected by the government, by the partners that we have, and I would hope that we can continue to advocate for the national impact of early childhood policy, as well as continuing to deliver to the needs in the target communities. Ethiopia is small, a much smaller program. We only formally registered there a year or so ago. We've just employed our first member of staff. And although we've been active there for many years, having our own staff and our own presence in the country will really be a boost to our programs. So I think in 5 years' time in Ethiopia, we will be operating in 2 or 3 regions. We will be known nationally, and we will be delivering evidence of the impact of the work that we're doing right now. And that's how you can start to get momentum. But it does take a few years to get on the ground, deliver the programs, build the evidence, and then start to use that to build momentum.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well, that's us pretty much out of time, save for bringing Richard back in just to say a few words to wrap things up.
All right, thank you. Thanks again to Matt and Ronan and everybody else that's Children Crossfire team that helped organise this today. And of course, thanks to all of you for coming. I hope that you got something from that and get a better understanding of the work we do and the depth of the work we do and our sort of how we are in there for the long haul, really, and the progress that the organisation has made over many years. And that doesn't happen without the joined up approach of the work we do, the local communities that we're working with, and also people like you in this part of the world that give us the resources to do what we do. So I hope you any feedback that you would have to this, we would appreciate it. Email or anything at all, just so we can improve what we do. So thank you again.